Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to learn React hooks for beginners, step by step. If you ever written React component and heard about hooks but didn't know where to start, then this video is perfect for you. We will start completely from the scratch, setting up our React application, learning the basics of hooks like useState, useEffect, useReference, and useContext, and even creating our own custom hooks. By the end of this video, you will understand how hooks work and how to use them to make your React project cleaner, simpler, and faster. So let's get started. Alright, so first let's create our React application. I will open project folder in git bash. Now I will type a command npx create react app. This command will create a new React application for us called my app. It might take a few minutes to install everything, so just relax while it's set up. Once it's done, you will see a message saying happy hacking. That means that React is successfully installed. Alright, now let's open our project folder in VS Code. To do that, we will use the change directory command to go inside the folder. Then we will type code full stop and hit enter. This will open the project directly inside the Visual Studio Code. Now let me make the VS Code window a bit bigger so everything looks clean and clear on the screen. Next, let's open the terminal inside VS Code. You can do that by pressing Ctrl and tilde button. The key is right below the escape button. Now inside the terminal, type this command to start your React application. This will start local development server, and after a few seconds, it will automatically open your app inside the browser. You should now see the default React logo spinning on the screen. That means your project is running successfully. Alright, inside the source folder you will find a file called app.js. It currently has some default React spinning logo code. So let's remove everything inside that div so we can start fresh with a clean page. Perfect. Now we have a blank canvas to build our own components. Next, let's import React at the top and also import the theme provider and theme button component that we will create in a minute. Now inside our components return statement, wrap everything inside the theme provider. This will allow us to use theme data like dark mode and light mode throughout the entire application. Inside the provider, I will create a simple div with some paddings. Then we will add a heading at the top. And finally below that we will add our theme button component. Now if we save this file, we will see an error message in the browser. As you can see, we don't have that component, so let's create that component inside the source folder. Alright, now let's open our theme.jsx file. First we will import everything we need from React. Next we will create something called context. It's like a global storage area for your application's data. This line creates our theme context, which we will store whether our application is a light or dark mode. Next, let's create a new function called theme provider. It will wrap around our app and give theme data to all components inside it. Here we are using useState hook to manage whether the theme is dark or not. Then inside the return statement, we will provide that data to all children's components using our context provider. Below that, create another function called theme button. Here we are using useContext to get access to our theme values. Now we will return a simple button that changes its background color based on the current theme. And that's it. We now have a reusable theme provider and a theme button that can toggle between light and dark mode using React hooks. Alright, let's head back to app.js. Inside the div, we have added our theme button. Let's save the file and now check the browser. You should see a button labeled theme light. When you click it, the background of the button switches to dark mode and the label updates to theme dark. That means our useState and useContext hooks are working correctly together. Awesome! We have just finished building our first working hook-based feature. In the next part, we will create a counter component to learn useState hooks in more details. We will also see how to use useEffect for fetching data and even make our own custom hook. So stay tuned and let's move on to the next step. Alright, now that our theme component is done, let's add another component inside our app called counter. This one will help us understand one of the most important hooks in React, the useState hook. So inside our app.js, right below the theme button, let's add counter. Then I will save the file and yep, we immediately get an error in the browser saying something like counter is not defined. That's totally fine, it just means that we haven't created that component yet. So let's fix that now. Inside our component folder, create a new file called counter.jsx. Once that is ready, open it up and start by importing React and the useState hook. Perfect. Now let's create our component function. Inside this function, we will use the useState hook to keep track of our counter values. Here what is happening, count is our state variable. It holds the current value. And setCount is a function we will use to update that value. And we are starting from 0 as the initial value. Now let's turn some JSX to display the counter and button. Inside the return statement, the first button increases the count by 1 every time it's clicked. The second one resets it back to 0. And that's it. We now have a simple counter built entirely with the useState hook. Alright, let's go back to the app.js and make sure we import our new component at the top. Now save everything, check the browser and you should see your counter section appear under the theme button. Try clicking increment and watch the number go up in real time. That's the magic of React State. Every update automatically re-render the component. Awesome job! You have just learned how to manage state using React hooks. And that's it for the useState. Now you know how to manage state in your components easily. Next, let's move on to useReference and see how it helps us access and control DOM element directly. Alright, now that we are done with the counter component, let's move on to our next example, the useReference hook. This one is super handy when you want to directly access or control DOM elements. For example, focusing an input box when a button is clicked. So first, let's use our component inside the app.js just like we did before. Inside the return statement, right below the counter component, I will type focus input. Let's head to the components folder and create a new file called focusinput.jsx. Once it's created, open it and let's start working on our new component. At the very top, we will import React and useReference hook. Next, let's create and export our functional component. Inside the component, we will create a reference for our input field using the useRef hook. Right now it is null, but once we attach it to our input field, it will store the actual DOM element. Now let's return some JSX. Alright, we have added an input box and a button. So what is happening here? Input reference.current give us the actual HTML input element, and .focus function is a built-in JavaScript method that places the cursor inside it. Notice how we use a reference attribute and pass the input reference. That's how we connect the useRef hook to our input element. Let's save the file and go back to the browser to test it. We are still seeing an error. That's because we haven't imported focus input into our app.js yet. So let's fix that. Go to the top of app.js and add this line. Perfect. Now save the file again and switch back to the browser. This time you should see your input field with a button that says focus input. Now try clicking the button and boom, your cursor jumps right inside the input box. That's the user reference hooks working perfectly. It lets you directly access and control DOM element without triggering a component re-render. So that's how you use the use reference hook in React. Super simple and super useful. In the next part, we will look at useEffect, which help us perform side effects like fetching data or updating the document title automatically when the component updates or mounts. So let's jump right into the next part. Alright, now that we have learned how to use reference, it is time to move on to another super important hooks in React, the useEffect hook. The useEffect hook let us perform side effects like fetching data from an API, updating the document title, or running some code automatically when our component mounts or updates. So let's see in action by building a simple data fetcher component. Just like before, we start by using our component inside the app.js first. So right below the focus input component, I will add data fetcher. Then I will save the file. After that, let's go ahead and create the component itself. Inside the component folder, I will create a new file called datafetcher.jsx. Once it is ready, open it up and at the very top import React and the useEffect and useState hooks. Now let's create and export our component. Inside the component, we will create a piece of state to store our data and another one to handle loading status. Initially, data is an empty array and loading is a set to true because when the component first loads, we haven't fetched anything yet. Now here comes the main part, using the useEffect hook. The useEffect runs automatically when the component mounts. That's the perfect place to fetch data from an API. Let's break this down. We are calling the fetch method to get user data from a simple API. Once the data comes back, we convert it to JSON. Then we save it inside our data state variable and turn off the loading status. The empty array at the end tells React to run this effect only once, when the component first mounts. Now let's return some JSX to display the results. Alright, so what is happening here? If loading is true, we show loading data. Otherwise, once the data is fetched, we map through the user list and display each name in an unordered list. Alright, so our component is ready. Let's save the file and move back to the app.js to make one small changes. At the top of the app.js, let's import our new component. Perfect. Now we are ready to test it. Let's check the browser now. At first it will show loading data. Then after a moment it should display a list of username or any dummy data from the API. That means our useEffect hooks is working perfectly. Alright, you just learned how to use the useEffect hook in React. Now you know how to handle side effects like fetching data, updating the document title, and more, all inside your components. In the next part, you will learn about custom hooks, how to create your own reusable logic, and make your React code cleaner and more powerful. So let's move on to the next topic and create your custom hooks. So far, we have worked with built-in hooks like useState, useEffect, and useReference. But now it is time to build our own hook. This will help you understand how hooks actually work under the hood and how to make reusable logic across components. So first, inside the source folder, let's create a new folder called hooks. This is where we will keep all our custom hooks so our project stays nice and organized. Now inside that folder, let's create a new file called uselocalstorage.js. First, we will import useState and useEffect from React. Now let's define our custom hook function. We will call it useLocalStorage and it will take two parameters, a key and an initial value. Next, we will use useState to store our data. Inside useState, we will use a function to check if there is already something saved in local storage under that key. If yes, we will return that data. Otherwise, we will return the initial value. Now we want to save our data to local storage every time the state changes. For that, we will use useEffect. Finally, we return the state and set state so our component can use them just like a normal state hook. And that's it, our custom hook is ready. Now let's create a new component to test this out. Inside the component folder, make a new file called testlocalstorage.jsx. Let's open it and start working inside. First, import React and our custom hook from the hooks folder. Now create a simple functional component called testlocalstorage. Inside this component, we will use our custom hook. Let's store a name, value, and a function to update it. Now we will return some JSX so we can interact with it. This component allows you to type a name and it will automatically save the name in your browser local storage. Even if you refresh the page, the name will still be there. Alright, now let's go back to our app.js file. Below the data fetcher component, let's import and use test local storage component. Alright, let's head back to the browser and check it out. To see it in action, open Developer Tool, go to Application tab and under the local storage, you will find the key called name with the value you entered. Type something in the input field, for example your name, and then refresh the page. You will see that your name stays there even after reloading. That's how our custom hook connects React State with the browser's local storage. And that's it for this React hooks tutorial. We learned about useState, useEffect, useReference, useContext, and even made our own custom hook. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and turn the bell icon so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.